Ooh, welcome back into another episode of Necessary Roughness right here on the Bite Size Sports Network. As always, I'm your host, John, and you see his background. You know what time it is. We brought Simon Shortt on the podcast to talk some Pittsburgh Steelers. And we've also got a fun segment I stole from the Minnesota Football Party called Free Agency Bingo. I don't know exactly how they're doing it. I just heard the title of what they're doing, and I thought it was really interesting. And I thought Simon would be the perfect person to collaborate on a bingo board with for free agency. So we'll dig into that at the end. We've also got a prospect of the week. Simon has taken the reins on that for this week, so we'll dive into a player to look out for this draft season. But before we dive into all of that, Simon, good to see you, man. Been a while since we potted
Yeah,
together.
man.
How you been?
I'm good, man. It's good to see you. Same old. Pittsburgh Steelers are in the same turn of the wheel as always, where we are just cycling through options at quarterback, daring to dream big dreams ahead of NFL free agency. And then it all comes crashing down when Christian Kirk gets traded at the 11th hour just before he becomes a free agent. And then you realize all hope was resting on the shoulders of Christian Kirk. And, we're right back to square one. Don't worry, we'll bounce back. We'll be all right.
Yeah, did you guys ever
There's
land
some
Brandon
Darius
Ayuk?
Slayton. We'll get. I think they're still on the phone. I think they're still working on. They're working out. Because there's an extension on the way or something. So they're clearing just enough cap space for that extension. We're all monitoring that situation very, very closely. I hear Debo's in the mix. I hear T. Higgins is in the mix. I hear Devontae Adams. Las Vegas Raiders, Devontae Adams is in the mid. It's all fine. Everything's
Yep.
good, man. George Pickens, we still have a lot of hope in him.
Yep. You might get something good back for Deontay
You know,
Johnson.
yeah. When Deontay clears waivers and comes back again, and they trade him again, the comp picks. It's all good. It's all
Yep.
We might fire Matt
Yeah.
Canada. It'll be fine.
Yeah. Dan Moore's starting at one tackle or the other. It'll be all right.
I still think Dan Moore, there's something there. There's some, and this kid Broderick, we'll see. We'll see what happens. Yeah, Najee probably run for another 1,000 yards.
Oh yeah. I mean
I'm fine.
that's the
I'm
best.
totally fine. I'm totally fine.
Top 10 back. Look at the cumulative numbers. Okay, so we are going to start with the Pittsburgh Steelers. We've got our Pittsburgh Steelers expert in the building. We'll talk a little bit about the AFC North at large, like Ben and I did last week with the NFC South, but we're going to hone in on the Steelers and squeeze as much information out of Simon as we can here while we've got him. So before we dive into any specifics with it, I promised you a diatribe at the top of the show. So just kind of give us your general thoughts on the Steelers right now, their position kind of going into the offseason, and any sort of, sweeping takes you have about the team at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, we're joking and stuff, and the Steelers are in a fairly healthy spot. I mean, they have stars at various points. They've put investment into the trenches, which is really important. They have a couple key players on both sides of the ball. They have a top 3 head coach in terms of all of the things that encompass being a head coach, and yeah, you're kind of treading water right now. Which, I mean, I think one of my big takes when it comes to the NFL is like everyone's just treading water until you find a franchise quarterback. The Pittsburgh Steelers had one until 2021. And unlike a lot of teams, the Steelers have tried a number of things since then to find a franchise quarterback. It hasn't just been draft one guy in the first round and hope and wait for 4 years for that guy to be good or not, and then accidentally overpay him or have nothing to show for it at the end. It's been sign a bridge guy with some pedigree, and then it's been draft a guy in the first round, and then it's been sign a veteran cast off who's won a Super Bowl and a bridge guy with some pedigree. So they've tried things at the quarterback position. Meanwhile, they're treading water everywhere else. And when you do that, treading water, winning 10 games a season and, being in the playoffs to me isn't the worst thing in the world. Now, again, I've been spoiled with a couple Super Bowls since I've been really closely following this. So, I feel a lot better than I think most fan bases would in that standpoint. But, I think it's not great, but it's not terrible either. And the biggest disappointment I think for Steeler fans right now is there's not many major changes from a coaching staff standpoint happening for the Steelers, particularly on the offensive line. O-line coach Pat Myers just doesn't seem like schematically or idealistically is a good fit with offensive coordinator Arthur Smith. Myers is a very gap scheme, power run game type of coordinator or type of a coach, and then Arthur Smith is the outside zone guy who can do a little bit of everything. But outside zone is where he thrives. So you see the miscommunication and guys running the wrong way on the Steelers offensive line all last year, just completely blowing assignments. And I don't think that speaks to any one player or any one thing, but I just think there's a disconnect there. And I think until that gets solved, that's going to be the main crux of the issue, even more than the quarterback situation for the Steelers in 2025. So we'll just have to see if getting a new mix of guys on the line in 25 helps, or another year of Meyer and Arthur Smith being together. But then my sweeping thought about for the offseason is you have free agency, you have draft. Free agency, I'm looking for the Steelers to spend a lot of money on the offense. That will obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, but most likely include just having to give a lot of cash to a quarterback this year, which they haven't done in a while. But go get another big name receiver. Go spend some money on some O-line depth, and then use your draft picks, save and maybe a corner too. But for the most part, you're spending money on the offense. Get veterans in who are gonna be able to come in and play right away. Right, come and start off running, start off hot, because that's the side of the ball that needs a jump start. And then on the defensive side, where you've got some guys aging, Cam Hayward is 57 years old, but is still an all-pro, but he's the only real defensive lineman on the team. And then TJ Watt is 30, 31, getting an extension this summer. Minka Fitzpatrick is getting to 30. You've got stars who have been the stars on the team for 4 or 5 years. You need to keep drafting and getting good young players on defense. Joey Porter Jr. is a good young corner. Didn't take quite the step we wanted last year. Keanu Benton, same thing, small steps, but a nice player. But you have to continue investing young pieces into the defense so that can continue to be a strength while you try to jumpstart this offense. So I'm looking for the Steelers to spend money on offense, spend draft picks on defense.
Makes sense. Yeah, they have pretty decent luck kind of plugging guys in and developing on the defensive side for sure. And you've got you're going to have the bones of a great defense at all three levels, just by way of having Cam Hayward, Watt, and Highsmith, and then having Minka and Joey Porter on the back end. So that sets a relatively high floor for you, and I think that makes sense as an approach to draft around where you have the star talent and try to bring some stars to where you don't.
Exactly.
That being said, and you talked about the offensive line as well. We talked about Dan Moore already this show, but that's a guy who played 90-something% of snaps this past season. But before he was hurt, James Daniels was a starter as well. Whether it's one of those guys or not, there are some contributors that are on their way out in free agency, including both running backs. Van Jefferson, who may not have been meant to play 70% of snaps or whatever it was, but ended up with a big role for you guys. But just kind of considering the 2024 contribution and how you think these guys project, who is your kind of number one priority re-signing before you guys start looking outside the building?
I love that you went with all the niche names, because that fits you to a T, the show to a T, and me to a T. But it's the quarterback, and it's Justin Fields. For 2025, where the Steelers sit in the draft, where the quarterback situation in the draft is, where the free agent and trade pool of veteran quarterbacks is, Justin Fields is the right pick and the best option for the Steelers this season. I, like many Steeler fans, were really excited when he kind of had a nice little runway from the summer through the first 5 games, 6 games of the 2024 season. But as you kind of look back on it and you see the way things played out with how Russ became, got back to the starting job and then never really lost it. And you think about, okay, how they use Fields in those 5, 6 starts, you could see that the offense just wasn't it wasn't it was a Russ offense that Justin Fields was playing in, because there wasn't a lot of QB runs, there wasn't a lot of play action rollout, there wasn't a lot of using the legs of Fields, which if you're gonna have Justin Fields, like, you need to use his legs 80% of the time,
Mhm.
right? Um, so I want to see Arthur Smith and Justin Fields have an offense for them for a full summer, a full spring, 17 games, and just see what it's like. I think that gives you, as a bridge quarterback, that gives you, he's still young, so it gives you a little bit of a runway for what the next few years could look like, but it also gives you the best chance, I think, right now. Russ isn't going to win you a playoff game in 2025, but Justin Fields in a QB run designed offense could, with that defense, if you do all the other right things, all the necessary things, take the big swings where you need to. You're not going to have to give Fields 35, $40 million a year, so you can use that on other things. We'll talk about that
Mhm.
later. But it's Fields for right now, to give him a 2-year contract, bridge quarterback money, 20, 25 mil a season over 2 years, whatever. Um, and then let everything else kind of fall into place around that.
That's really interesting. And that makes sense too, because with the infrastructure they have, like we talked about, with your high floor defense, an offensive line that you hope kind of is rounded out throughout this off season, and kind of comes to align with the coaching staff. The you're probably getting another big time pass catcher one way or another. Um, and I think if you approach putting an offense together around Justin Fields with some intentionality, it
Mhm.
could look a lot different and a lot better than it did this past season. Not that it didn't look good over those first 5 games,
Right.
but like you said, I think there were 5 or 6 designed runs per game over
Hmm.
that stretch,
Hmm.
which was like somewhere near half as many as he was getting in Chicago. Um, I probably butchered that stat, but it was something like that.
And most of them were like down at the
And I
goal line. It was
think,
like goal line packages. It wasn't even like,
yeah,
it's 2nd and 12. Let's try to get 8 yards on a QB option or something. It was just like, hey, we're 5 yards and in. Let's let Fields run the
mhm.
ball. It's very disappointing.
Yeah, and if you just kind of cut them loose, like get a little Cordell Stewart going, keep the
Hmm.
defense mean. We've seen that formula work. We've seen a really really good Niners team kind of get to the next level with the injection of Colin Kaepernick, and
Hmm.
make it to the
Hmm.
big game.
Hmm.
So I that's an interesting approach, because the rest of the team, um, when you trust the front office to kind of put everything together along the margins, the rest of the team's pretty ready made.
Hmm.
Um, so that's a really really interesting thought, actually, is a commitment to Fields and leaning into that skill set and what it could bring to the offense, especially when you might have an all new running back room next season. Um, so if you're building your run game out from
Hmm.
Fields
Hmm.
as opposed to injecting him into it, maybe that looks a little bit better for you
And,
guys. That
and the
is
thing with
an
Jalen
interesting
Warren,
thought.
yeah, because Najee's gone. Warren is a restricted free agent, so they can tender him and probably will pretty easily. But there's a lot of consternation that he's not the best run scheme fit for Arthur Smith either. Like, he's more explosive of a runner than Najee was and is, but he's still not. He's still like a downhill bowling ball guy. He's not. thought of at least. I mean, I don't know. You know me. I'm not sitting here grinding Jalen Warren runs and trying to project if he could be an outside zone guy. That's not my thing. But there's a lot of consternation that even he wouldn't be a great fit. So there's a lot of Steeler analysts and fans that are thinking one of these running backs on day 2 who can be explosive to the outside in that kind of system. So then even if you have Jalen Warren on $4 million, right? Like he still might just be a third down back for them even next year. So in terms of building out that running game, it could be really designed around a Fields and a Travion Henderson as a day 2 pick, or a Caleb Johnson out of Iowa, something like that.
As soon as you
Which sounds
stopped
kind of
talking, I was
cool.
going to say Maybe Anderson.
Yeah, which kind of which sounds kind of cool. I like Henderson State, but that hurts my soul thinking about a
Yeah.
day 2 pick on a running back at the year.
Yeah.
You get out of the Najee first round thing. Meanwhile, Landon
Yeah.
Dickerson from the same draft just got highest paid guard. Anyway, whatever. We don't have to do all that. But yeah, so in terms of building out the run game, even if Warren is back, which he probably will be, it's on a 1-year tender deal. And if he's also not a very good fit for Arthur Smith, then yeah, well, what would it really be?
Gotcha. And when you talked about free agency, you thought a lot of that would be allocated to the offense. I won't hold you to that for this segment, but what is your favorite free agent target for the Steelers, for 2025 and beyond?
Yeah, it's the offense. It's Devontae Adams, man. And I mean, I try not to do the black and gold glasses every offseason and just look at the best free agents and say, I want this guy to the Steelers, because that's not really how they roll. But we made the 2-minute long joke about how this team is just kind of on the same wheel, just turning over and over again. It's because they don't do that. They draft and they develop, and that's great. And when a guy's not worth paying, they trade and they get good value for him. I mean, they got 5 interceptions from Dante Jackson by trading Deontay Johnson last year when they weren't going to pay him. That's pretty good. They get Joey Porter Jr. for Chase Claypool. That's awesome. But it's time to get a playmaker on offense, and there's not a running back to spend that money on this year. You have Pat Freiermuth at tight end, so you're not going to do that. There's not a quarterback to spend huge money on. And 90% of the receivers in this free agent class, you might spend $10 to $18 million a year on. But if their talent level is sub George Pickens, then they're going to get put in that Van Jefferson role, and they're going to get 400 yards and 2 touchdowns and mostly run routes and block like that, and that's all well and good. You need that player, but that should be your wide receiver 4, not your wide receiver 2. So they need to get somebody who's going to walk in, be better than George Pickens, put Pickens in his place a little bit from a personality standpoint, and give the offense some semblance of juice. And I know, the real in the mud Steelers analysts will tell you this offense can't support a second high profile receiver, just from you're going to spend a lot of money, but they're not going to throw the ball that much anyways. I don't care. You need another guy out there, and you get the guy first, and then you make the offense work through that guy the way you need. And so, but before Adams officially got released, and even not, it was Amari Cooper, Cooper Kupp, Stephon Diggs. I don't know. I can't imagine any of those guys coming to Pittsburgh and having the ceiling or having the impact that they could have on a good offense, for lack of a better term. But Devontae Adams, I think, is still the player that kind of supersedes that kind of eclipses that narrative and that issue. So it's Devontae Adams. Go give him 23, 25 million, whatever. Do something out of the norm for Pittsburgh. Because if you want to take advantage of this specific core of the defense for another year or two, you need to make a splash that way.
Yeah, and it really got dicey for Pittsburgh last season when teams got out in front and they started to have to play from behind. And just because you don't plan on playing from behind doesn't mean you don't need the juice to get back in front when you find yourself there. So I do like Devontae, and I think too, getting a veteran next to George Pickens, particularly one who he's got a respect for having been the best receiver in football for some length of time. And I know he's got that just kind of unwavering confidence in himself as well. But I mean, if you can get Devontae in there and just saying, give him a few tips on his release, things like that, and say, hey, George, what if you could just separate a little more so every catch doesn't have to be an amazing fucking circus catch.
What if you try to get both feet in bounds at one time? How does that
Yeah,
sound?
how about a front shoulder fade?
And listen, man, I love Pickens, but yeah, a veteran to some of the tricks of the trade, like the push off stuff, right downfield, that would be
Mm-hmm.
helpful. But even just the hey man, it's not just you that can do this, right? Because Pickens walked into this team as the best wide receiver, and he's been that for 3 years. And
Yeah,
because there's been Allen Robinson's a veteran who was good for 2 years, right?
yeah,
George Pickens doesn't care about Allen Robinson in 2023 or whatever year he was there, right? But Devontae
yeah.
Adams is still a legitimate Pro Bowl, if not in the right circumstance, an All-Pro wide receiver, even in 2025. And I think Pickens would have to kind of respect that and be like, oh, okay, well, if I start acting up, they can bench me, right? If I get taken out of a game because I'm not because I'm not keeping my focus because I'm getting in fights with corners, they can just throw the ball to somebody else now instead of they still have to throw me the ball even when I'm pissed, right? So um, I think just a mental and physical check of no, this could be the guy. And Pickens isn't getting a contract extension right now after year 3, and a bit of a wake up call. Hey, we can go out and get another guy. So there's a lot of layers to it, not just shiny free agent receiver, which obviously has been the Steelers' kind of hope and desire and siren song going back for a couple years now. But this is the one. He's a free agent. You literally just have to give him maybe not even the most money, but competitively really close. So just go do it.
You think? So you think Theseus is docking the ship this year, huh?
No, it's not actually gonna happen. It's
Okay.
it's gonna be Darius Slayton for
Yeah.
60 million. That's what's actually gonna happen.
60 million, 105 targets. Write it up. Okay. Well, so the Steelers are in, they're never in a terrible spot, which is the thing about the Steelers.
No. Mm-hmm.
They're going to pick in the late teens or the low 20s. They're going to fight for a playoff spot. They are going to make it really difficult for the other 3 teams in their division, no matter what their ceiling is ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
But looking at the rest of the division and kind of considering financial constraints, present talent, and kind of everything in between. If you were, shopping for a general manager job in this division, what is your favorite roster / situation in the AFC North? And not necessarily just going into this season, but kind of in that, 3 to 5 year time horizon that you'd look at it if you were a general manager kind of coming into this.
Yeah, I mean it's Baltimore, right? I mean you got a unicorn top 3 quarterback. Everything else is pretty gravy once you're in that situation. The fun answer is Cleveland because you could walk in and burn it all down and start
Yeah.
anew, right? That would be the most exciting one. But you're
Ryan Pohl's
probably
wet
also
dream.
yeah, exactly, 100%. He's like, all right, I did the thing. I got Caleb Williams. I can leave for now, right, and try to do it all again.
Mm-hmm.
Then Ben Parker, who I'm staying in for tonight. We were doing a series and he gave me the Browns because he tried it for 2 weeks and he was like, "There's nothing you could do here," and it's literally you have the exact same team for them, or you burn the entire thing and you sift through the ashes for 2 years and then you try to come out on top in 2027. So the real answer yeah, if somehow the GM job in Baltimore was open, I would pay to have that job as opposed to trying to get paid for that job. Because then I'll sleep in the office. We'll live in the facility, and I just get to like think of all the fun shiny toys I can find for Lamar Jackson, and say, hey, you've won with Gus Edwards and Nelson Aguilar. I think I could beat that. I think I could find a couple better players than that. Let's see what happens.
I like that one. Devil's advocate here a little bit. Uh, how much would you consider Cincinnati if they didn't have the most cash poor owner
Right?
in
Yeah.
the league?
Yeah. Because
Like
that's the big
if
thing,
you
right?
had access to if you had access to more guarantees, if you had more of a hair trigger like some of these GMs are able to have with the ownership groups in place, does that situate like say ownership is even for the two
Hmm.
teams? How
Right.
close are they in your opinion
It's
to
pretty close
that
because I mean,
situation?
Burrow's still a top 5 quarterback, right? But I think Lamar has shown, and I mean, Burrow's evolved as a quarterback since he's come into the league. Obviously, like he's gotten better at not taking sacks, but stylistically, he's still the same quarterback he's always been. So you're always kind of have constraints on what exactly you could do because you're always going to need some semblance of the same functionality around him, right? You're going to need some semblance of protection, and you're going to need the receivers that can win deep specifically, because the arm isn't creating stuff 40 yards downfield for Burrow. He's creating a bunch of other stuff in a bunch of other ways, but you need, I think, more specific talent around him to unlock that highest potential that he's at. But Lamar, like I said, I mean, we've seen, dog walking rosters, right, around him. And we've seen him be a completely different style quarterback, right? We've seen him be a run first quarterback who has to throw short. We've seen him be a run first quarterback who has to just chuck it deep. We've seen him be a drop back operator who can also run. So Lamar is almost idiot proof, right? Like I could walk in and put a roster around Lamar because he would make anybody look good. But Burrow, I think you would need a little more of a deft touch to just make sure you're putting the right pieces, you're giving him what he needs. Um, it wouldn't be a bad situation, obviously, and it's kind of the best of both worlds because you have to tear down that defense and start over, so you get to do that while you keep the offense kind of intact. Um, but yeah, if I'm also trying to keep my job well, I mean, again, if I'm trying to keep my job, Cincinnati doesn't fire anybody. There's 6 dudes there. Um, but again, ownership and all else equal, just from a winning and roster standpoint, if I'm especially trying to keep my job for 10 years, it'd be Baltimore. Don't tell my dad I said this. Disown me.
Yeah. Up until more recently than anyone would think, Cincinnati legitimately had one scout. Like
Yeah.
this century.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's goofy too, and it's a great point you bring up with Lamar's kind of scheme versatility. As much as the layperson might say, oh, scrambling mobile kind of quarterback guy, it probably should be a Greg Roman type
Mhm,
calling
mhm,
plays there and
mhm,
whatever, but really, I mean, you've seen him operate really well out of like heavy personnel sets.
mhm,
22 with Pat
mhm,
Ricard,
mhm,
um, or when they had when Josh Oliver was still there, and they also had
mhm.
uh, uh, God that little tight end. Not in these blocking tight ends. They'll run a fullback.
Yeah.
They'll have Gus Bus and J.K. Dobbins, and they'll run the piss out of the ball. You know who I'm talking about. It's really pissing me off right now.
Yeah, I'll
I'm
find it.
trying to
You
think
just
about
keep
it.
going. I'll get it.
And then, but you've also seen him. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. You've also seen him operate pretty well, spreading things out, and you go into a lot of quick game with guys like Zay Flowers getting in the mix. But with Burrow, he has a real like staunch preference to spreading it out, very little motion. He wants to
Nick Boyle.
identify the defense It's a lot of 5-man protections. Fucking Boyle, yes. A lot of 5-man protections, and a lot of him just kind of doing the Peyton Manning uh,
Mm-hmm.
thing. A
Yep.
lot of 11 personnel, detach the tight end and spread them out. But you've seen Lamar be able to operate that way, maybe not quite to the degree cerebrally that Joe
Mm-hmm.
Burrow does. That's kind of his superpower. He's very similar to like Dak in that way, the way they kind of have to
Right.
construct their offense. So as a GM, you might have not that much control over what sort of play callers and coaches you bring in, let alone the type of personnel you have access to, trying to navigate that. So that's a really good point about the Baltimore offense. And, for what it's worth, I think on the defensive side, and from a head coach standpoint also, if you're teaming up with Harbaugh as opposed to Zach
Mm-hmm.
Taylor,
Mm-hmm.
and I like Zach Taylor, but it's just kind of a different category.
Yep.
It's kind of cool having a special teams, former special teams guy as your head coach, because then you're going out and finding play callers, and everything's very adaptable over there. So I like that call as well. It might have been a little less obvious than Tampa Bay was for the NFC South for this question last week, but I I wanted so badly to have an argument for the Falcons, but I guess that's a hill they'll be buried on.
Yeah, no, it's just not gonna work out.
It's just not gonna. It's been like 3 seasons in a row. I'm like, the offensive line, guys. It's a good offensive line. Caleb McGarry,
We'll
but
talk about some Falcons O line in a little while.
yeah. Oh yeah, we'll certainly get there. Before we do, let's talk a little bit of defensive line
Let's do it.
with your cue sound effect. Bow, bow, bow. Prospect of the week.
Kenneth Grant, baby.
D tackle out of Michigan. Tell me what's what.
First off, just tell me how this moves you. 6'0", 331 pounds, 33.5-inch arms, 10 1/8 inch hands. Runs a sub 540. He didn't get to run the 40 at the combine. They found a hamstring strain, I want to say was what they found, but he's probably gonna run his 40 at the pro day, so watch for that. But he made Bruce Feldman's freaks list at 331 pounds, and he looks every bit of it. I mean, you watch the tape, him next to Mason Graham it's laughable. And he's doing all the same things that Mason Graham is doing. He is lining up all over the line of scrimmage. He is two-gapping. He is one-gap penetrating. He is, my God, in a way Steve Spagnuolo would have dreams about, getting his hands up and deflecting balls left and right. He chases guys down from behind. He chases guys down from the other side of the field. Like just literally everything you could want in a defensive lineman. You see the pop of his play strength on every single play. You see the pads. You see the helmet reverberate on the offensive line when he was making contact. Before I even found the Bruce Feldman's freaks list, when I was watching this tape really early in the season, you can just see the way he moves. I mean, they're running him on stunts and twists and stuff from the interior as 330 pounds. He dropped into coverage a couple times for Michigan. Like, this guy just is an athletic freak, and he's gigantic. Good use of his hands to evade offensive line. So like real technician as well. Like really can use his hand fighting to not only deter offensive linemen from getting a hold of him, but really shocks them out of place as well with his hands. And yeah, just IQ overall, just like always head on a swivel. When you watch the Michigan defense from this era and you see that on all these guys, like they've just been so well coached, so well taught, but there's just real buy-in on all the little stuff that you don't see. Yeah. We do this every draft season where there's a couple defensive linemen where it's like, question his motor, takes plays off, and like nobody's too concerned about that usually. But and that's probably rightfully so. But on the other hand, you have to commend and give the brownie points to the guys that don't do those things, right? To the guys that are always on. and that's Kenneth Grant. I mean, just the big things and the little things are all big things to this guy. And again, did I mention he's 330 pounds? So he could legitimately be a nose tackle, but he has the athleticism to move any. I mean, you and me both here, right? Like 3-4 fronts, he can be that 4-eye 5 tech, and he can be anywhere inside of that. And again, he can run games and loop around outside. And heck, if a 4-3 team wanted to get crazy and throw him at an end for a couple plays, if the Eagles wouldn't do this because they like their ends, small, but move him. You can move him all the way up and down the line, and he's going to do everything you ask of him. So Kenneth Grant, defensive tackle out of Michigan, is my guy. He's kind of been floating in like the 20s on mocks for a long time. But he's definitely a first round pick. And I think he's a guy that should be top 16, 17. Like if the Bengals pass this guy at 17, for example, there's something there, someone's messing up for sure. That one scout was too busy that day, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. And Bengals is a great shout. They're going to fumble Trey Hendrickson. Sounds like they're probably going to cut Sam Hubbard. BJ Hill's a free agent. And they're coming off being 31st in run defense EPA. So, I hope he gets past there because the Vikes at 24 has been a pretty popular Kenneth Grant destination.
Not getting past 21. Not happening.
Yeah, good call. Or he's just going to fall to the Ravens, and everyone's going to be like, "Yes, what are we doing? Pick good players." But no, I've seen him. I haven't ground his tape as much as I'd have liked to already. But just the play where he chases down Katron Allen, 30 yards from the line of scrimmage or so, 25 yards from the line of scrimmage. I've seen him with some reps out at 5 technique. When he's at the 3, his rip move to a guard's outside shoulder is vicious. I mean, you just see the guys there's winning a rep on the interior of the defensive line, and then there's kind of a step above that where just visibly you can kind of see that guard panicking. Like you can just kind of see more how helpless he is. It's less of a back and forth and more of a just, he underhooked him. Like he's going to drive him back and get to where he's going. And I saw that he did an interview at the Combine with Brett Coleman and E.J. Snyder. And his words were that he's going to run a 4.8 or a 4.9 when he does. And that he wants to play at 345.
I love this guy.
So
man. He's such a
dude. He's so cool. And then playing next to Mason Graham in college, I think is a really because there's a lot of people who I hear a ton of this about JJ McCarthy where people use someone's college supporting cast as sort of a knock when it's a powerhouse and there's all this other NFL talent on the field. But honestly, I think for both of those guys, having played next to each other is actually going to be a huge benefit at the NFL level, especially if they end up next to a stud on the interior. Obviously Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter went to the same place, but it was kind of the same thing with those two, where it's like, they're going to be able to operate well. Like, it's the Byron Murphy and Devondre Sweat kind of thing when they're coming out. It's like, okay. But what's funny about these two is, and it was kind of flipped with Byron Murphy and Devondre Sweat because for whatever reason Murphy was a better two-gapper. But with these two, they're both extremly versatile, and you see both of them move all over the place. And the way things are installed at Michigan, when they install pressures and when they install their run fits, they went from Mike McDonald to Minter. And the way they install everything, all these guys know what all of the chess pieces do on a given
Right.
pressure call or a given
Mm-hmm.
play. So then from there, they're able to call a different front and call the same pressure, and whoever lines up where still knows their responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And to have that acumen at the college level and right into the NFL with the physical tools that a guy like this has, I don't know, man. Like he could be, I think he could be one of those guys that might shock some people and just kind of go top 10. I mean, it wouldn't even blow me away. And again, I haven't watched as much of these guys as I should to have like a fully informed opinion. But from what I've heard from a lot of people who have, I don't think I'd be shocked if he goes before Mason Graham. I mean, I've seen guys who are like, this is DT1. And it's
And
like,
I mean, after the
okay.
combine,
I
and everyone's
mean,
freaking out about Mason Graham and the arm length, and he actually came in sub 300. So like, what is he? What is he really? Listen, man. It would. I mean, I love Mason Graham as a prospect, but if it would be more about, I think it would be more about could Grant sneak into the top 10 more than could we see Graham fall? Like, could we see
sure.
Jacksonville not really know what to do at 5? And just be like, what if we just got a plugger in the middle to get that run defense back where it needs to be, and go crazy, because Mason Graham could slide to, like, I don't know, 8 is probably the floor for him. Carolina, but I mean, like the Jets, if the Jets are sitting there and they're like, we want another defensive tackle next to Quinnen Williams, because to your point about like going to the NFL, you could be next to a stud. There's an increased focus on having stud defensive tackles, right? So like it's
Yep.
becoming less and less of a rarity to have 2 good defensive tackles next to each other. And if they decide to go with, okay, we want a guy next to Quinnen Williams, and maybe we want a guy that's slightly more of a plugger to free up Quinnen Williams a little bit more, okay, well, we'll go with Grant. And then Grant, so I don't think it would have to even be a situation where Graham falls significantly. I think Kenneth Grant is fantastic. And maybe it's just the wondering, like you said, about like playing next to Graham, but then being that 330, 340, 345 guy, that notion that he's just a nose tackle. Because I've heard that too. Like, like for the Steelers. Okay, Steelers are in base 3-4 a third of the time. They're not going to draft a nose tackle in the first round. This guy could play anywhere, man. And even if you play in a 3-4 and he is your nose tackle in base, you're in sub package more often than not, and you're going to get this guy as a rotational defensive tackle, pass rusher, at least half the time, right? He's going to split with one of your guys a good amount of time. So, yeah, I think the idea of him being a late first round pick because he's seen as a nose tackle is something that NFL teams aren't necessarily going to see and have an issue with. So I would be less surprised if he was in the top half of the first round than I would be if he fell, let's say, like deep into the 20s.
Sure. That makes sense. And yeah, I mean, if he runs that 4.8, if Trent Baalke was still there, he'd take him at 1.
I don't know. Only 33 and a half inch arms. Baalke would be like, oh, that's great,
that's
but
right.
I'm looking for 34 and a half, so let's get James Pierce or something.
Right.
James Pierce's arms.
Well, and I think something that plays into this too is like the defensive tackle market has been really fascinating to me.
Yeah.
In particular over the last like 3 years, because now you're going to start to see it shift to like similarly to wide receiver, where there's going to be way more impetus to draft these defensive tackles higher and in the first round and draft them at all because of what we're seeing for second contracts for these guys. I mean, Osa Odigizua, Deron Payne.
Unless you're the Cowboys, and you're like, we have to give Osa Odigizua $20 million a year. We have to. It's a necessity.
Yeah. Christian Wilkins. Like, I mean, all these guys are getting paid. And they're starting to really value it. And I think we're seeing the same thing with the guard market coming up here pretty soon. These guys aren't going to be falling to the second and third round anymore when they're, top 3 guards in the draft, just because you've got to get out in front of these second contracts when they're starting to balloon the way they are. And, it becomes an allocation of resources proposition at that point, because, some of these defensive tackles, if you draft one that's as good as you want him to be in the first round, suddenly he's going to be making 8%, 9% of the cap on his second contract. So,
Yep.
Yeah, I like that one. I think sky's the limit for him. Is he just doing pro day runs? Is he still like on track to be good to
Yeah, I
go
think
for them? Do you
I
know?
mean, I think that's what the hope and the intent is. Hope, we'll see. I don't know exactly when they've even announced when their pro day date is, but hopefully it's as far back as it can be, so we can make sure he's ready to go. Because I want to see that man run, no doubt.
Yeah, yeah. I hope he screams gutturally like
God,
Membu did.
oh, Membu, OT1, baby.
It
After that,
wasn't that exhilarating. Okay, sweet man. Well, let's jump into the money segment.
let's do it.
Okay. Bear with us a little bit. We're free balling this. I am just going to be reading our bingo selections out. I am going to get something made like on Google Docs or something that's just a little bit more palatable, and post that on Twitter. And then I'll post that on the YouTube like community feed if I can figure out how to do that.
Kev.
And maybe you guys can Kev, James, somebody can follow along with us, and maybe, hey, we'll see if we win any money. This is not a coverall. We're just looking for your classic bingo. So everybody chill out. There's a couple of spicy-ish ones in there. But we want them to kind of be teetering on that edge of, realistic, but also kind of a gutsy call. Just so, we could sit here all day and say, Cam Bynum gets a multi-year deal or, something. But we did some things where, we predicted like APY threshold or annual average value of contract. We predicted some destinations for some free agents. We predicted some re-signings, things like that. So we'll jump right into it. If you're in the chat, let us know your favorite one of these as I start to rattle them off. And as we go through them, for some of these, we might stop and give a slight explanation or just a peek behind the veil as far as our thought process with these. But Simon and I kind of split it down the middle and just got mutual approval on these as we kind of talked through it. So we've got a 5x5 bingo board right here. Clip this. All right. This is not going to be here for long, so pause this.
Giving
if
away
you
the
want to read
draft
it.
board. Yeah, you're giving away the draft board here.
This is fucking hard knocks all over.
You got the O-line code words in the background of your Instagram post. What are we doing?
Yeah, Jahmyr Gibbs, get off my set. So we've got. I'm gonna go top left, and I'm just gonna be zigzagging. So if you listen back to this, you'll know my board isn't cheating. These are the rows we're gonna have to get. So I've got Jeremy Chin back to Washington. Just a Dan Quinn guy. He can't have J-Ron Curse anymore. Yeah. So he's got Jeremy Chin. I think that's what he's going to be rolling with. Aaron Rodgers will go the first week, at least, of free agency unsigned. So once free agency opens, the clock starts, and if Rodgers is not signed within that first week, we hit. Milton Williams will garner over $23 million average annual value per year. Hollywood Brown returns to Kansas City on a 2-year, $20+ million deal. Sam Darnold to the Las Vegas Raiders. Stephon Diggs to the Los Angeles Rams. Carlton Davis to the Jaguars for too much money. Trevon Merrig will get over $15 million per year. De'Ami Brown will sign a contract that exceeds the contract of Darnell Mooney, which was 3 years, $39 million at signing. I know we've got a little cap inflation. That helps this, but still, I think De'Ami Brown is going to make more money than people think. Yeah. Market-setting rookie extensions will be signed at cornerback and safety. Guys like Trent McDuffie are up for their rookie extensions. Guys like Kyle Hamilton.
Sauce Gardner. Kirby
Sauce
Joseph
Gardner,
is on that list. Derek Stingley.
Stingley's getting
DBs
there.
are getting new ceilings this year for sure.
Yep. One of either Keenan Allen or DeAndre Hopkins to the Buffalo Bills. Joey Bosa to the Lions. Chris Godwin back to Tampa Bay. I put that in the middle for the free space one. Simon and I kind of agreed that was it should be a no-brainer anyway. It's not going to be. It is going to be the third offensive coordinator in 3 years, but it's not an outside hire. It's the passing game coordinator getting promoted to OC. And if you were in those rooms at all, I think you know just how important the Chris Godwin screen game was to the efficacy of that offense, as well as just his ability as a route runner. I've got Javon Hargrave to the Minnesota Vikings, cut by San Francisco, so he will not affect the comp pick formula if he comes in as a veteran free agent. Josh Myers will become a top 5 paid center. Russell Wilson to the Tennessee Titans. Tyler Linderbaum will become the second highest paid center behind Creed Humphrey. Whether that conflicts with this next one or not, Drew Dahlman will garner over $16 million per year, which probably will put him around the third highest paid center, barring any restructures. Devontae Adams will become a top 10 paid wide receiver with his new contract. Talanoa Hufanga will stay with the 49ers. Justin Fields back to Pittsburgh on a 2-year deal. Jameis Winston will land with one of the New York teams. Jameis Winston will go where the media is. Ronnie Stanley will get over $20 million per year. Patrick McCarry to the Vikings as well. And DK Metcalf will be traded to the Raiders as well, joining Sam Darnold to form what very well may be the greatest 9-route combination in the league. Maybe not, but excuse me. So if you're in the chat,
guys who only got one move, yeah, that's great.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't
tell us your favorite
one thing.
Exactly. We will at one point in the season run a stutter and go, and we'll get you on it in Vegas. Not very many times though. So let us know in the chat what was your favorite bingo square, and follow along with us. Like I said, I'm going to try to post it places. I think it'll be kind of a fun thing to look back on, and a fun thing to return to. Really, the next several free agencies. I think it's a fun exercise to kind of,
for sure,
plot things out. Put your Brad Spielberger hat on and see if you can't not necessarily nail down exact contract values, but just what kind of what kind of feel you have for the pulse of NFL free agency, which is flippant and fickle and insane. But sometimes somebody lands somewhere and you're like, of course. So hopefully we get a few of those. And there's obviously some teams left off the list, some big time players left off the list. If I didn't steal this idea today, we may have fleshed this out a little bit further. But Simon rolled with the punches. It just like I said, I just heard about it today on a local Vikings show, and I thought it was a really interesting concept. So that is all we've got for this week. Simon, thanks so much for joining again, for filling in for Ben here this week. Always fun chatting football with you, man. Let the people know where they can find you and your work in the meantime. I'm sure we'll have you back on in the near future. I probably before the draft. I'd like to have both you and Ben on
Please.
for a show pre-draft. But in the meantime, where else can they find what you're working on?
Yeah, well, again, John, thank you so much for having me, man. This is always a blast. Love doing this. Love being with the bite sized crew when time allows. So thank you all for supporting this and supporting John and everybody. So you can find me on the Simon and Friends podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Every single week, every Thursday, an episode comes out. It is heavy NFL draft for us, basically now through the draft. So if you like NFL draft, or if you're just trying to get caught up on the NFL draft, like so many of us are, we've been doing draft stuff all year long for the first time, which has been a ton of fun. It's been a new experience for me. So go to the Simon and Friends podcast, check that out. Part of Box Score Network, a collection of podcasts, much like this one, full of sports sickos. So make sure you check all those out. Go to our YouTube channel, where almost every other week now until the draft, we're going to have a mock draft as well. So go to the Box Score Network YouTube channel, and you can see me and Ben Parker and a bunch of other people on as well. But thank you all so much for watching. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, and Ben, he's over there on Box Score Network from time to time, and the other guys they kind of have in rotation are great as well. Like Simon said, it's another batch of sickos over there. So if you have any interest in what we talk about, I think you'll like Box Score Network as well. Go subscribe to that YouTube page. They got on YouTube relatively recently, and YouTube's the only way to check out mock drafts, right? You got to be able to see the board. So go check out Box Score Network. For me, in the meantime, until next week, guys. Next week, Ben and I are going to be back, and I think it'll be more of a kind of a news show. We'll just catch you guys up on all of the extensions, trades, signings, cuts, everything like that to kind of prep us for free agency. And then after that, we'll probably have a free agency recap show, and then we'll lead up to the draft with some more division outlook sort of shows, at which point we can kind of review what they brought in for free agency and really kind of nail down draft needs from there. So it won't look like the NFC South episode last, and it won't look like this one because there will be a little bit less to project, but that'll mean we can just get even a little bit more granular as we start to look at the draft. And then, like I said, hopefully we get Simon back on so he and Ben can catch me up on some of these prospects. Like I said, I haven't been grinding as much tape as these guys. So super looking forward to that. Otherwise, you can find all of my written work on zonecoverage.com/Vikings. Kind of a goofy last week and a half, so there's nothing super fresh for me on there. But I've got a lot of prospective free agents for the Vikings to bring in. I've got a Tershawn Wharton piece up there. I've got a couple like free agent tier rankings for the Vikings and how they might fit, some things like that, as well as all kinds of other stuff. There's a lot of other great writers on there that cover all other Minnesota sports, and the Packers are on there. I'm not sure how they snuck in, but they're on the site as well. So check all that stuff out on zonecoverage.com. And then in the meantime, stick around here on Bite Size Sports. Of course, we'll be back next Tuesday with Ben Parker, but we've also got a couple other shows going on. ADP, Another Damn Fantasy Podcast, is on the network here. And we also have some really cool things in the works that our fearless leader Kev and I have been discussing for content on the channel, some more historical content and long form stuff that he and I are going to be working on, some pre-recorded kind of stuff. So kind of keep your eyes and ears open for that. I'm really excited for it. The only information I can give you is it's going to be, I think our first one we're going to end up working on once he and I chat is something of an Eli Manning video. I kind of want to chronicle really from the Kerry Collins Super Bowl meltdown in 2000 up until getting benched for Geno Smith in 2016, and just kind of how wild of a ride his career was, but more centered on the Giants as an organization over the course of that era. Patriots Super Bowls, some shitty years in between, Steve Spagnuolo. It'll be a really fun one to research and to write the script for and to put together for you guys. So a little bit of shift in content maybe coming your way. But we are really excited for it, and I hope you guys check it out. All right. Well, thanks again for sticking around. Drop a like on your way out. Will help us a ton. Subscribe if you haven't already. Like I said, we got a bunch of shit coming down the pipeline. So stick around. Thanks again, guys. This has been Bite Size Sports, and we'll catch you next time.